Ladies and gentlemen, today is June 15th, 2017, and this is the KNKL Show, episode 342, where we learn to be better artists. My name is Ken Lafferty, and I would like to welcome you to another show. Today we are going to be doing Hollow Knight fan art, because I'm sure many of you have been playing this amazing game, as have I, and we're going to be jumping in and doing some fun fan art of that today. And specifically, we're going to be talking about a technique called light shaping. Now, what is that, you may ask? Well, it's actually starting with, rather than starting with a blank canvas, a white canvas, we're going to be starting with a dark canvas and painting our lights in, trying to sculpt our scene together. And I found that it's a good way for you guys to get off your butts, or in this case, get off your thorax, and stop procrastinating and just get to work. And I think the reason why this works for me is personally, and by the way, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The reason why I feel like this works for me is because it allows me to sort of think in a different way. It engages your mind in a different way, and it allows you to begin thinking in terms of light and shape. And you will notice that, of course, we're using our trusty chalk brush. If you guys haven't downloaded this brush yet, I highly recommend you do. It's in the description. You can download not only this brush, but all the other brushes from the past. And what we're going to be doing here is we're just trying to think in terms of light. Now, I know that many of you are concerned with drawing lines first, right? You might be wanting to sort of draw out the entire Hollow Knight's face first like this, and that's okay. That's okay. But eventually, what I want you guys to be getting good at is thinking about, okay, well, let's figure out where our light source is from the beginning, okay? So in this case, let's imagine that there's a light source right here. Light source right here, and it's kind of shining this way, okay? So that is our general kind of feeling, and this is in a 3D space, so of course we can't see this here. But imagine that it's coming from the top left in this case. And with that information, armed with that information, we can now infer that there would not be a ton of light that would be hitting right here on the bottom side of our Hollow Knight's pincer, whatever you want to call this thing. I always really liked the design of these characters because their pincers become sort of like ears. In fact, I thought for the longest time that the Hollow Knight was a rabbit when I first saw it, and then come to find out later on that it was in fact an insect, which was very cool. So let's go ahead and start with something like this. Now see how we can immediately start sculpting in our character just by painting lights. This is our light shaping technique. And like I said, the reason why I like it is because it begins to engage a different part of your brain. And normally you're really concerned about having clean line art and clean everything. You want to make sure that your designs are on point. You want to make sure that your anatomy's on point. However, with this, I feel like you're able to kind of push all that stuff to the side and just get to experimenting. And I kind of want to expand a little bit further on that, guys, because I feel like oftentimes when people talk to me about art block, they talk to me about, oh, well, I have this idea for this picture, or, you know, oftentimes it's just like I sit down to start working on a piece, and I look at the blank canvas and it just bothers me. And I've talked to you guys about a couple ways that you can deal with that. A is, look at this. I'm actually following my own instructions today. Start off your canvas not being blank. Get your references over here. Get just a couple things, invite a couple people to the party, things that you can look at, things that will kind of fill your canvas for you off the bat, and then start working on one of your own pieces. Okay, so that's trick number one. Trick number two is that I feel like figuring out different ways, different exercises that you can do, such as this light shaping technique, will also kind of open your mind to different things and get you thinking in a way that you're not used to. It'll get you thinking in a way where you're forced to you'll be making a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure that you'll see me do that here as well. I'll be making a ton of mistakes as I go through this. But I think that you're able to excuse yourself a little bit more because you're working in a style that you're not necessarily familiar with. You're trying new things. And I think that that is ideally the mindset that you should always have, even when you're working on something that you feel you are comfortable with. Let's say that you're a comic book artist and you're working with line art. But the faces are turning out like crap, or your compositions are turning out like crap, or your action poses just are not reading properly. I want you guys to understand that there's always a point where you'll realize that you could have improved. There's something that you could have always done better. And this especially happens to me when I come back and look at old drawings from a while ago. I'll look at it and be like, I thought back then that this was the best thing that I had ever done, but looking back at it, I can tell that it is complete and utter garbage. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually really like the way this is turning out. I'm really digging this already. Okay, so check this out. Okay, so we're talking about light, right? So let's pretend for a moment. Here's where I think the light shaping technique really begins to be fun, is because you start thinking about things like cast shadows. So let me make a new layer right here, and let's talk about cast shadows. So we know that the light is coming up like this, right? We have this cone of light that is affecting our entire Hollow Knight. But then we get to ask ourselves questions like, okay, well here I can see the geometry is sort of bending away from the light, so it's natural to say that there is a shadow there. But then look at this. Look at how I added this other shape in right here. This is what we call cast shadows, ladies and gentlemen. Cast shadows. And by that same logic, we're going to have a cast shadow from the mask or head of the Hollow Knight that's going to come down here, but we haven't represented that yet. And that is why there's not as much like depth happening in this piece. So that's what I'm thinking about in my head. Let me go ahead and put that into practice and show you guys how I would do it. So I'm just grabbing colors. I'm actually grabbing the shadow color. I'm going to paint it back in. Alternatively, you could erase it too. Whatever works best for you. But see how once I just erase this entire bit right here, see how now that feels like a shadow. It feels like a shadow. And again, it's giving more life to your character. Giving more life to your character. I'm actually really liking that. That's really fun. Okay, so now I want to draw in the rest of the Hollow Knight's body. So let's figure this out. Okay, so we have the problem of saying, okay, well, we have the light up at the top left. And I want to kind of draw his legs in maybe here. But there's not going to be a lot of light happening in these areas. So how do we represent the rest of his body? Well, here's how you're going to do it. You have to consider the background, believe it or not. And we're going to do it like this. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to start playing around with our background. Now, one of my favorite areas of the game was Green Path, because after you start the game out in this gloomy kind of blue-gray area where everything is just like destroyed and it's like the ruins of this old city, you move to this place called Green Path, and it's like this overgrown, lush, beautiful forest area. And I really like the contrast of those two things, and I'd like to also represent that here. So let's go ahead and think about, okay, well, you guys are familiar with a spotlight. How does a spotlight work? Well, spotlight is going to cast light in an area. See, just like this. And then from that, we'll be able to draw the rest of the Hollow Knight's body, obscuring that path, So let's go ahead and start with something like this. I think that looks pretty good. Cool. Maybe a little bit more up like that. I don't know. Let's just start with that. And let's create a new layer, and let's go ahead and draw the Hollow Knight's body. See, now we can draw those legs in. Now we can draw his legs in there. Oh, isn't that nice? Now, it is going to be a little tough because ideally I like to set up my poses and stuff with line art, right? Again, we're working in a style that we're not completely comfortable with. We don't always do this, and that's okay. So if your style becomes a little wonky or your poses look a little stiff, that's okay because you're trying something new. Don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad at all about that. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to have this cloak. I'm going to make this cloak kind of spin around like this. I think that could be cool. Kind of bringing our composition back to the character's face. Let's go ahead and do that. I think that looks quite nice. And see, now we have the silhouette of our character's legs. Now, most importantly, we need to consider, okay, so the character is here on top of this spotlight, but we also learned about cast shadows. So how is the cast shadow going to be affecting this? Well, let's go ahead and let's put the most obvious ones in first, the ones that are right by his feet. So the ones by his feet are going to just basically do this and this. And then this head, the way I like to think about it is this way. Let me go ahead and draw this diagram of how I like to calculate my cast shadows. And again, this is all very just kind of eyeballed. So you can go ahead and just draw things like this. You can say, okay, well, if this head was right here and it was projected onto the floor, see how you can kind of calculate that? And of course, I'm doing this all in my mind, and I'm just eyeballing it. So I know that a majority of the shadow is going to exist in this area, okay? So with that knowledge in mind, armed with that knowledge, let's go ahead and create a new layer, and let's cast a large shadow in this area. And what this is going to do is it's going to paint over our nail, which you don't want. Let's go ahead and move that back a little bit. Can we put this here? Okay, cool. There we go. I'm just moving the layers around a little bit so that way our nail can still be shown a little bit in this area. And because of that, this nail, we're going to have to move this because technically that still would be affected by our headpiece. So maybe what we'll do with this nail is we'll move it down a little bit more like this, because you want to think about it. The nail is emerging from the cast shadow of the head. So probably would look a little bit more like this. There we go. That looks pretty cool. That looks cool. Not a bad composition either. Digging that. Okay, let's continue with this. So we've got the headpiece in this area. And we have, let's go ahead and get the rest of the body in there. So this is going to obscure quite a bit of the other leg. But don't worry about that because we've got the general gist of it down. And it looks realistic to do it this way. Well, realistic yet still stylized. All right, cool. So I'm digging that. That's actually quite fun. That's looking quite good. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to start adding some additional colors into this because up till now, we have been light shaping. We've created a sculpture of a character, which looks, fine and dandy, but we've only been using one color. So that's going to cause our composition and just the color theory in general to look a little bit dull. It's going to look a little bit dull. And here's how we're going to make things look more interesting, just like this. We're going to take the blue of the cape, and we're going to say, okay, well, with this light that's shining on us, what color would it be? Because most lights are not just a perfect white light. Oftentimes, there's a little bit of color to those. So I'm going to say that this light has a little bit of a warmth to it, aka make it a yellowish light. So what we're going to do is for this blue, we're going to begin hue shifting. Hue shifting towards, well, what happens when you add yellow light to blue? It's going to push it towards green. So this is your hue Richter scale. So we're right here currently. We're going to start moving towards green. We're going to start lightening and saturating. Now watch what happens when you start dropping this color in. Create a new layer. Let's put this in the hottest parts of where the light would be hitting. So say right here, right here. And I always imagine the Hollow Knight's cape being almost like his wings, basically. So I really like to have some areas that are very, very bright. Maybe like this, maybe almost like a scaled texture. Start adding these little things in, and it'll kind of take on like a pearlescent quality to it, if you notice here. Having that hue shift always creates a little bit of a pearlescent quality to it. And we like that. So see how that's already adding some interesting mixes to our piece here. I love that type of stuff. And for those of you who are wondering, well, why did you make those dots, or why did you choose that texture, and how did you know to do that? I actually did a whole nother episode on easy texture, or I think I call it easy material rendering, and you can click up here to go check that out. So that's my basic gist on how I like to render materials. You always think about, basically the gist of it is you think about the shininess, right, the glossiness of the texture, and then you think about the actual geometry of it, and that is what creates the little cracks and the little divots in these areas. And then from there, you can create some very, very convincing looking textures, all by dividing the technique into a bunch of different steps, which is what I'm always a fan of because I like to simplify things, not just for teaching, but it also really helps me out because I'm a simple man and I like simple things. So, cool. So now you can see, just by adding those different hues in, we've got a very interesting looking cape. A very interesting looking set of colors here. I'm going to make this a little bit brighter. I want some extra additional textures going down this way. And I'll just make them kind of fizzle out, or rather, just get a little less intense as they go down the body. That looks cool. Okay, so let me show you guys another thing that I'm thinking of. As I can see right here, this is a common thing that I run into whenever I'm trying to texturize things, and it's something that you should watch for too. And that is that you're going to naturally want to create repeating patterns. Do you see how this pattern of scales is very similar to this pattern of scales in terms of the size and just the basic design of it? It's like, look, there's a large one followed by a bunch of small ones around it. And that is something that you should try your best to avoid. To create a more interesting looking piece, you want to have different looking textures, okay? Different textures. And that just has to do with balance. Remember, I talk to you guys all the time about small, medium, large. Now, small, medium, large applies here as well, but you also want to make sure that you're not repeating the same sizes of small, medium, large, the same designs. And it can be fixed as easily as this. Watch, see I'm going in there. I'm just changing this up a little bit. So I'm going to say I'm going to make these scales ever so slightly larger, and then these scales a little bit smaller. Maybe subdivide it one more time. And that should give us something that's a little bit more interesting on the eyes. More interesting to the eyes. Cool. Not bad, not bad. I'm also going to hue shift this a little bit more towards purple in the back. A little bit more purpley in these areas. And let's go ahead and sharpen this up. Sharpen up this cloak. And maybe blend this just a tad bit. And there you go. Now we're getting some interesting Hollow Knight capes. Now let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the piece here, because now that we've drawn in some interesting looking little textures, we also want to consider the rest of the important parts of this piece that will allow it to feel like it is consistent. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take that same principle from the cape and we want to add some texture to the leaves in the bottom. The leaves of green path on the bottom. So let's go ahead and just texturize this a little bit. Maybe we can have some pieces kind of sticking up, gathering some light in these areas. There you go. And then keep in mind, right, only this part, right? The light wouldn't affect this entire blade of grass, but only the parts that are facing up and to the left. See that? See, all the parts that are facing up and to the left will gather the most light. The rest will. They'll also cast shadows. These pieces of grass will also cast shadows. Don't forget about that. And you'll get something sort of like that. Not bad, huh? Not bad. Let's go ahead and add in a little bit more texture to these areas. And then let's talk about reflected light, which is the other most important part of this. Okay, let's get some large leaves in there, large pieces, some small pieces. Let's balance this out. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. See how we are using small, medium, large to our advantage to balance and create an interesting texture, even though we're just kind of, our shapes are very rudimentary. Our shapes are very rudimentary and just kind of like little splashes of paint onto the canvas. And this is another reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about this today, because this is very fun. This is a very fun way to experiment and just allow yourself to begin playing around with color, which I think is probably one of the most important things that you can do as an artist, and I think we don't do it enough. I think we're not spending enough time experimenting. We're always taking time, and I think this contributes a lot to art block, because half the time we're not thinking about experimenting. I always imagine every single piece that I do, even for a client that is supposed to be professional, I'm always experimenting with new things. I'm trying things that I haven't done before. Because oftentimes when I get it to look right, when I pull it off, it ends up being one of my best pieces that I've ever done. Because I'm able to pull off something that I've never done before. And because of that, I try to look at all my pieces as experiments, okay? And I think that you guys should too. Because inevitably, also, I mean, of course I say the success story first, sometimes I am working on a client piece and it doesn't work out as well as I wanted it to. And that would be called a failure. But that's okay because, again, you learn from that stuff. You learn from that. And then it's easy to... I feel like it's always easy to kind of fall back on simpler things or ways that you've succeeded in the past. But if you only rely on that, then I just feel like you're not growing enough as an artist. You're not growing and you're not challenging yourself. And worst of all, you set yourself up for art block by assuming that it's going to be perfect. Assuming that you want it to be, assuming that you always want it to turn out, perfectly. Exactly. That was what I was trying to say, but finally came out right this time. Yeah, so always be looking at your pieces, especially your personal pieces, as experiments. That way, if it doesn't turn out right, then it doesn't really matter. And most importantly, you're able to get out of your own way at the very beginning. Get out of your own way at the beginning of a piece and say, hey, this is just designed to be an experiment. I'm going to try something that I've never done before. It may succeed. It may fail miserably. But that is okay. All right, cool. So now we got some interesting colors in there. Let's talk about reflected light. Reflected light is very important because that is the other side of our piece. That's the other side of the lighting in our piece. Because we're all familiar with the light that's coming from up here. We're all familiar with the light that is emanating from the light up here. In fact, I'm going to make this orange so that way we know that it's yellow, right? This yellow warm light that's coming from the top. Actually, it's more like this color. It's not that yellow. It's more like this, yeah. This bright yellow light is coming down, shining on the entire character, going down here, affecting all of this, right? But then we forget about, oh, that's right, once it hits here and here, that's actually going to reflect upwards and become a secondary light source. And it is going to be a green light. Isn't that interesting? Now let's see what happens when we take that logic and we apply it to our entire piece. And basically what that means is that we're going to take this green and we're going to begin mixing it. This green is going to begin mixing and darkening. So here's a quick way for how I like to calculate how the reflected light is going to work. So we have a blue cloak, right? Blue cloak plus green light. So we know that we're going to be right around in this area. But most importantly, we are going to darken. It's going to darken in general because the second light source, right, the reflected light is going to be darker. And second of all, just by contrast, our main light source is much brighter. So you're naturally going to end up with something like this. Now, let's go ahead and start laying that in, seeing how that looks. And watch how that begins to actually shape your painting in a new and cool way. Let's go and put a little bit of this green here on the legs. A little bit of green here as well. That looks cool. Looks quite good. I'm actually gonna cut that off right there. That'll make it look like a knee. Like that. Let's put a little bit of this green in there on the underside of the nail. And let's also have some green right here on the other side of this cloak. Let's have some green affecting this area. All right, there's no primary light affecting here, no primary light affecting, but the reflected light is able to get under there. So we'll see a little bit of the detail on the underside of the cloak, thanks to reflected light, ladies and gentlemen. Reflected light, we love that. In fact, this part would still be dark because neither light source is going to be affecting that part. Okay, now most importantly, let's go ahead and add that to the skull or the face mask or whatever you call this thing. Let's go ahead and get that in here. Now I want a little bit more lightness right here. That is probably going to be a little bit more intense right there. Put some green right there, green right there. And then also I want to talk to you guys about the primary light, because now that we've chosen to make it a more warm light, we're going to be changing up the color of the skull as well. So let's get into that. It's going to look something like that. Cool. Not bad, not bad. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just show you guys a really easy way to do this. Really easy way to change your light source. I don't show you guys this enough because I actually don't use these types of things. These are layer properties. Sometimes I use them, but usually at the very end of the piece. But here's a really quick way to change your light source. So go ahead and create a new layer, as you saw me do right here. We'll just call this light. And notice most importantly that right here on this drop-down menu, I've chosen overlay. Now there's all kinds of different properties, layer properties that you can use, but for this one I'm going to use overlay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to choose our color of our light. So it's like, remember, this bright yellow. Let's go for something like this. Let's go ahead and grab our soft brush. Let's begin painting this in. Let's paint this in. And what this is going to do, hopefully, is this is going to give our light on the skull a bit more of a yellowish glow. And then we're going to try playing around with a couple different properties and see if we can get the look that we're going for. Because looking at this already, I think that it's okay, but I think that we can make it look even better. Okay, so that's not too bad. Ooh, I actually want to drop a little bit in there too. Oh man, now we're getting crazy with it. Might as well just put that overlay on everything. So that looks really nice there, adding some additional yellow in there. And the reason why I try to veer away from this stuff, guys, is because, I don't know, this is a personal preference. In fact, this is the way that I'll say it, because I don't want to knock any artists that use these types of things to light their pieces. I think it's awesome, and I think it's very efficient. But I'm always about learning, right? I always want to know, how could I create this same effect if I didn't have Photoshop? If I only was able to use a paint program with colors. I always want to be asking myself, what is the relationship? What are the relationships that's happening, and why does this look better than this? Why does it look better when I add some additional warm light to this as opposed to before? Why does that happen? And so the way that I study that is by eyedropping. So you'll get in there and say, oh, okay, so this is like a bright yellow. Okay, well, that's easy enough to understand. But what about in here? What color is this? Oh, I see. There was a hue shift that happened. Pay attention to here. It went from yellowish, and it moved towards orange, more towards red. And it's darkening and saturating ever so slightly. Same thing down here. What is the relationship that's happening? Okay, so we start with this bright teal, and then we go towards blue, hue shifting towards blue, and then down here, blue. But most importantly, also look at this. We're also desaturating. We're moving from here, we're going darker and moving to the left. So see here, darkening, then we go moving to the left. Isn't that interesting? So we're hue shifting, darkening, and desaturating. All of those things put together creates a very interesting relationship, color relationship. And that is color theory in a nutshell. So I hope that helps you guys out. Let's try a couple different things here for our overlays. Let's see if we can find something else that we like. Vivid light looks pretty cool as well. I like that one. In fact, that was the one I was thinking that would look cool. Let's go ahead and darken this down, or rather lessen a little bit of the contrast, or a little bit of the opacity on this. It looks okay. I still think I like overlay the most. Overlay does look good, and a little bit of vivid light looks good. Let's put both of them on there. Let's do vivid light and the overlay. Maybe? Actually, that doesn't. Does that look okay? Let's see. Oh, the other thing that I really like to do is hue shift. Hue shift your light sources once you put them in. So let's go to our vivid light, and let's go ahead and hit Control U. And let's go ahead and hue shift this a little bit. Hue shift, let's go ahead and desaturate a little bit. And then you're going to create all kinds of different cool looking relationships. I think that looks pretty dang cool. That looks pretty dang cool. I like that a lot. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to overstate it. Let's put a little bit of that in the grass too. And just like that, the last thing I want to do is I want to put a super hot highlight on the nail. Then we're going to go ahead and end today's show, ladies and gentlemen. And I will actually, I forgot if I told you guys the news. But you guys can tell I'm on half vacation right now out in California. And I'm getting ready to go on full vacation. I'm going to be going to Japan, and it's going to be really freaking awesome. But because of that, I'm going to be gone for quite a while, quite a few weeks. So this is me, basically, leaving you guys with something fun to do while I am gone. And I want to see some awesome light paintings when I come back. I better see some awesome light paintings when I come back. Let's talk a little bit about bloom. So bloom happens when... Oh yeah, here is a good example of when I like to use these layer styles. And that is at the very, very end of my piece. And I like to use something called bloom. So let's make a new layer, call it bloom. And I've set the layer property to hard light. Now what I like to do for this is I'll choose the color that I want to bloom, aka make it glow. And then I'll put that on an area, see, right here on the nail. And then you can do stuff like this, where you can sort of create this little... Oh, that's not working. There we go. You can do stuff like this, but I feel that it works better if you darken it down just a tad bit. Let's make a new layer. Just so we can make this look right. There we go. So create like a shine this way, shine on that way, shine on this way. It's just as simple as that. And the way that you make it look a little bit more softer is take your soft brush and lightly erase these edges. And there you go. Look at that. You got yourself a shine on going. That looks quite good. I actually think I liked it just with the, if we rotate it a little bit. Ooh, yeah, that looks really cool. Ooh, yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. Let's go ahead and stretch it out a little bit. There we go. I think that looks pretty nice. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, you have yourselves a very good looking Hollow Knight. I still think that there's a little bit too much warmth in here. I'm going to go back to those lighting pieces, and I want to add some green into this. Let's add some green into these shadows here. I think that would look a lot better. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. I like it. I like it very much. I'm going to get rid of this stuff in the actual eye as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to end that. Alrighty then. So, yeah, let's go ahead and catch up on the rest of our news. And then we're going to end today. And then I'll let you guys know how you can download this, or that PSD in just a second. So, yeah, I'm going to be gone for the next few weeks. I will be returning from Japan on the week of July 10th. So, it's about 2-3 weeks I will be gone. And I'm sorry, but you guys can follow me on Instagram. I'll be posting lots of pictures and cool art that I find in Japan on Instagram. Again, the link is in the description, so follow me on there if you'd like. I also put all of these, I'll be putting the new Hollow Knight up on there as well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end today's show, ladies and gentlemen. So, like I said, if you want to download this PSD, as well as all the other PSDs from the past, just click up here. It'll take you over to Patreon, where you can download the PSD. And, yeah, like I said, dissect all this stuff for yourself. Like, don't take my word for it. I'm actually really happy with how this one turned out. Really digging this. So yeah, go through there, look at all the different layer styles. Like this one's an overlay, this one's, vivid light, a couple ones that I haven't used before. And really I want you guys to get to a point where you are truly looking at each new piece as an experiment. It's always going to be an experiment. And be willing to admit to yourself that you're going to be making mistakes. You're going to be tackling things that you've never done before. And because of that, at the end of the piece, you're going to look at it and you're going to realize that you could have improved on a lot of things. But I will say this, with every new piece, you will notice things that you could have improved on, and then you will take that to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. There's never truly going to be a point where you finally arrive, like you will arrive at a point where you will be confident, but you'll never truly arrive at a point where you feel that you've mastered everything. And because of that, I mean, the best way that I can say it is that you won't ever truly be confident. Even me, by myself. I am not super confident when I'm doing new pieces, but I'm in the proper mindset. And I tell myself that I'm going to be learning and I'm going to be trying new things and that I will figure it out. Because that is one thing that I always have done, is that maybe I'm not confident that it's going to be perfect, but I am confident that I can learn from it and take what I learned from this piece into the next one. And that's what I want you guys to be doing too. I want you to get out of your own way, get out of your own ways, make a lot of stuff, and learn. Always be learning, always be thinking about what am I going to be focusing on with this piece, and what am I going to try that I never have before. So that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that helps you out. I hope that takes you guys to some awesome successes in the next 3 weeks. You guys take care of yourselves. Thanks again for joining me on YouTube. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. My name is Ken Lafferty. I'll see you guys on July 10th, the week of July 10th. Maybe not exactly July 10th, but that week. And until then, you guys take care. See ya. Enjoy the lovely lane. Let's go ahead and pull that up and let's talk about how to get there. Head on over to tinyurl/KNKL fanart and you'll be prompted by the secret link. See, I'll click that and you'll be dazzled. Thank you guys for your amazing pieces. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.